Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Beyond the watch, there are ways out. There is a light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Beyond the watch, the gods will offer you chances. Know them. Take them.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today we're going to be talking about a very cool optic from Monstrum Tactical. This is their G3 6-24. And before we get started, I do want to say right off the bat that this optic was sent out to me for free by Monstrum Tactical by Chris over there. Seems like a really nice guy. And so I did not pay for this optic whatsoever. There was no money changing hands. They're not affiliated with me. They don't give me any sort of money if you buy anything like this. So they did send me the scope for free though, and that is what we're going to be talking about. So if you would like to help out the channel in any way, you can like, share, and subscribe. You can also purchase AR500 steel targets from me in the first link in the description down below. We have a couple different sizes and shapes on sale right now. On top of that, there's also Subscribestar, which is basically just a pro to a Patreon, and I have a bunch of exclusive content up there that goes up there first or only there. So let's go ahead and get into some of the boring specifics about the Monstrum G3 6-24. Of course, it is a fairly high magnification scope at 6-24, so it's more of a long range / precision style optic. And one of its main selling points is that it is first focal plane with a high magnification, decent glass for only about, I want to say right now retails for the scope just by itself at $250. Now $250 for a first focal plane 6x24 is a really good deal. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great optic though. So for $250, let's go ahead and get into the specifics and see if it is actually a good value, even though it is a very cheap price. So first up, it is very heavy. I think it's like 30 to 32 ounces, somewhere in that range. It is nearly 2 pounds. It is a 30 millimeter main tube, type 3 hard coat anodized aluminum, 6061, perfectly fine, very, very standard. I believe it has a 50 millimeter objective lens. It'll be in the description though if I mess that up. Overall, very, very large, very bulky. You do have very large turrets. Now the turrets in their downward position are locked and you need to lift them up to rotate them. They've been fairly good in my opinion. They have fairly decent clicks as well. I'll let you listen to those really quickly. And then on its side here, we do have our parallax adjustment as well as our illumination. And now illumination on this guy actually gets pretty bright, which is awesome. So it's nice to have a really bright reticle. If you wanted to use it for whatever reason, in my opinion, using it the reticle on max illumination in daylight, it can get a little washy just because of the way it interacts with the first focal plane reticle. In my opinion, not the biggest of deal, and I really didn't shoot with it illuminated at all because I was doing mostly daytime shooting, and the reticle is very good for most applications. Talking about the testing, we have put this on 3 different rifles. The one that it is on right now is the Thompson Center Compass, which is a very, very entry-level model with a lot of good features. It's co-branded with Smith & Wesson. Really high-quality components. They guarantee 1 MOA 3-round groups. I believe I've only ever seen that once on this rifle. 300 Win Mag, as I mentioned, very, very aggressive muzzle brake on it. and the scope held up very, very well. Now, the entire time I was running this optic, I had it in worn rings. So worn rings, these are worn steel rings that we have here, very, very low profile. They fit really nicely on this rifle, as you can see. I also ran it in another worn mount. Let me grab that one right here. Now, Warren did send these mounts out to me. This is, I forget the exact name, it's their X-Scale line, I believe, which is one of their newest ones with a 45-degree offset, which does fit, even though the Monstrum 624 is very bulky. I also ran it on a 12.5-inch 308, both suppressed and unsuppressed with my 4-1 suppressor, which is currently on that gun behind me. And I also ran it on my SPR 16.5-inch AR-15 build 5.56, both with a muzzle brake and suppressed. So in terms of round count, probably in total around 500-ish rounds, but mostly high caliber stuff. So a lot more extensive testing than what I would do on some other scopes, but I wanted to give it a good variety and see if it would hold up to a little bit harsher recoil than just putting it on a 5.56 and saying, hey, it did just fine. This 300 Win Mag, well, actually my old 300 Win Mag has killed multiple cheap optics, and the 6-24, the G3 held up just fine to this, no problem. Again, I am using worn steel rings and worn mounts. They did send them out to the channel for free. Now, if I haven't mentioned it already, the turrets are of course in MOA, and the reticle is also in MOA, which is good. They should match in my opinion. What you have is quarter MOA clicks, so of course you lift to turn, and then quarter MOA per turn. Very easy. They're easily resettable. One interesting thing, at least on these turrets, is they're not perfectly even. For instance, this one here, you can turn and then push straight down. On the windage though, when you turn it, it almost has like two places where it will fall down into. So there's something funky going on within this windage turret on this unit. However, it never lost zero, and more importantly, it was very, very easy to zero. So when zeroing at 100 yards, again on 3 different guns, I generally bore sight, take a shot, see where it is, and then adjust accordingly, and then fine tune my group from there. And making adjustments on the Monstrum Tactical 6x24 G3 and first focal plane was very, very easy. So I didn't do a round robin test. However, the adjustments on it were very precise and very easy. The furthest range that I took this scope out to was only 300 yards. I live in Western Washington, and it can be very difficult to go out beyond that. There's a couple spots where I can stretch out to 450, 500 if I'm really, really lucky. But those take a lot of time in driving just to get there, if they're even open right now. So I did a lot of my shooting at 300 yards, not even at max magnification. Most of the time I was running it anywhere from 6 to 12, honestly, because you do have a first focal plane reticle, and as you zoom in, the reticle also gets bigger. And actually, we might as well talk about it right now. The reticle that you have inside of the Monstrum G3 is a fairly simple center circle dot, which I believe is about 1 MOA, which isn't super precise. So if you're trying to shoot really, really, really tiny groups on max magnification, it can be a little bit difficult because that center dot does get a little big. Not too big, but it does get a little big. But when running it from 6 to 12, it is very, very clear, very precise. You have a very forgiving eye relief on it, which I personally really like. It does have very simple 1 MOA hash marks all the way down. I think you have 40 inside of the scope, not including your, of course, turrets if you want to dial instead of holding. The one downside I would say on the reticle is that it doesn't really have any good windage holds. So when you're in MOA, MOA is of course a little more fine than mil dots. So when you're using MOA and you don't have any holds over, whether it's, you know, 2 MOA holds for wind or anything like that, it can be a little obnoxious. Now, when I'm shooting at 300 yards with a high-powered caliber, you don't care really about the wind at all. I mean, it's moving at basically nothing, and it's not very windy here in Western Washington where I am at. But if you were going to be using this for its intended application, for a high magnification precision scope, for hunting or any of those sorts of things, and you were taking a longer shot, say 500 yards with something a little bit slower and not quite as beefy as 300 Win Mag, then you would probably want some sort of wind reference hold to make your first shot impact, increase the probability of a first shot impact. So that is the one downside I would say to the reticle. Other than that, it's a very simple MOA reticle with 1 MOA hash marks all the way down. And so for just target shooting, I would say it's perfectly fine. But for other applications, wind holds are very, very necessary, especially if you live in an area that is windy and you have access to longer ranges, especially if you're pushing beyond 500 yards, 600, 700, 800 yards, maybe even 1,000 yards. Because again, 24 magnification will get you out that far very, very easily, and the glass is decent enough to do that. So I do wish that they had windage marks, but that being said, it's a very small thing, and you can of course dial for wind instead of holding for wind, but it is a nice thing to have that option in the reticle itself. So instead of having to dial, you can just not mess with anything and just take your shot. So the reticle is good in my opinion, if just a little too simple. So let's go ahead, we've already mentioned it, but the glass itself is surprisingly clear. So on most really budget scopes, the glass has been getting better and better year over year. Most of these scopes, this one included, they're made in China, and the glass is manufactured in China. That's where they actually make all the stuff. And their capabilities have been going up year over year. So even though this is a very low price tag of around $200, $250, depending on where you buy it from, there's no real distortion or blurriness to speak of, especially even at high magnification. Most of the time when you go really far up in magnification, sometimes you'll get some optical degradation at the higher levels. However, with this scope, I really didn't notice it. Again, most of my shooting was anywhere from like 6 to 15, as again, out to 300 yards, you don't need all that much magnification. You can do it with a red dot fairly easily, but it is nice to have more magnification for a more precise shot. So the glass in the Monstrum G3 6-24 is very good. There's absolutely no complaints about it. I couldn't ask for better glass for less money. It is very, very good. It is on par with much more expensive scopes. The Swamp Fox 1-10, which is a $550 optic. Again, pretty much identical glass. I know that it's made also basically in the same facility. Strike Eagle 1-8, which has really good, really bright glass. Also, again, nearly identical optical quality, because again, they're all basically manufactured in the same facility. So even though this is a budget scope, the glass does not make it apparent, and it makes it very, very easy to put shots exactly where you want them. So moving from there, let's go ahead and talk about the other test that we normally do, and that is the double drop test. So double drop test is fairly simple. You do 2 drops, one on the top of the optic like this from shoulder height, and then one on the side of the optic. Now the drop, I believe, was done on my 16.5-inch 5.56, which is a very reliable little gun. Again, done in the worn mounts. So I'm pretty sure the worn mounts were not the issue. That mount's like 150 bucks. Very, very high quality, almost as expensive as the scope itself. But during the double drop test, we noticed a shift in zero of about 2 MOA. Now, 2 MOA is not much. It's not going to shift you off target inside of 300 yards really at all, unless you're firing at a very small target. Because again, at 300 yards, that's only about 6 inches. But that is more than I've seen in a lot of other optics in the same price range. Normally in like budget red dots or LPVOs in the $200 to $400 price range, I'm looking at anywhere from 0.5 to 2 MOA. So this is towards the top end of the spectrum in terms of zero shift. However, I do think that that is completely acceptable. And of course, it didn't break the optic. The optic is still working perfectly. Everything on it is in very, very good condition. On top of all the extra shooting that we did on top of it, it is held up very, very well. The durability is there, but if it does take a nasty spill, it probably is going to shift your impact somewhere between 0 and 3 MOA on the really, really bad end. So not bad, but it does, and it really doesn't matter in its use case scenario, which for me would be if I wanted a high precision, high magnification rifle scope for zeroing, for printing really small groups, or for taking long range if you have the ability to do so. Again, if I was going out to beyond 300 yards, say 500 or 600 yards, then I would want something with higher magnification like this. But at my ranges that I normally shoot at, 6-24 can be a little bit overkill, so I'm a little bit biased there. But in its actual preferred use case scenario, which is like a target scope, maybe even a PRS scope if you're trying to do like a really, really budget like PRS style thing for like under $1,000 for rifle and optic, this can be a really good option to get you in the door. Another good use is hunting. One thing I do want to mention about this scope is that at its lowest magnification, which is 6, it does have a very, very wide field of view. If you extrapolate it out to a low power variable optic that has a 1:6 field of view, or a 1:6 magnification, the field of view on that on 1x would be consistent with like 110 feet, which in my opinion is excellent. So at 6x, which is its lowest magnification, you do have a very, very good field of view, which again, for the money is really nice. So for if you need more precision, so you still have really precise first focal plane reticle that again changes with your magnification. So even at 6x, you can get a very wide sight picture if you're taking a shot at a couple hundred yards or hunting. It can be very important to have a very wide field of view so you can see more through your optic. And again, that first focal plane reticle that changes if you have a few MOA to hold over for. And speaking of first focal plane, of course, as I mentioned, first focal plane means that the reticle changes size with your magnification. So if you have 5 MOA holdover at like 300, 400, 500 yards, whatever you're shooting at, whether you're on 12 magnification, 24 magnification, or anything in between, the hash marks stay in their same relative size, so you can still use the reticle at any magnification to take your shot. Again, for me, inside of 300 yards, it's really not that much of an advantage because there's basically no holdover. At 300 yards with normal zero distances, especially on like ARs and stuff where you have much higher sight height and stuff like this. At 300 yards with 300 Win Mag, I want to say with 100 yard zero, it was like 3 MOA or something like that. So I was basically just aiming towards the top of the target, or not even towards the top of the target, just top half of the target really. And I was making impact. So if you're doing longer range shots, having first focal plane is really, really nice. The only thing that I would say that kind of holds this scope back a little bit is if you are shooting at longer range, you're gonna have to dial for wind. So even if you are holding within the reticle for elevation, you still have to dial your windage. Otherwise, you're just holding off in space and there's not really a good reference mark. So in my opinion, of course, first focal plane makes a lot of sense in something like this, where you have higher magnification, you want more precision, and if you want to take quick shots without having to dial, you can still use that reticle at any magnification that you're at. So it is a huge advantage, especially in higher precision scopes. The reticle, as I mentioned, does work really well. It's very, very simple. The only thing it's missing is some sort of windage holds, whether that's just 2, 4, 6, or something very simple like that, just to give you a little bit of wind depending on your distance. So if you were to ask me if you could get more scope for less money, I would very simply say no. I don't think that there is a scope with these features in this sort of high magnification range that offers anywhere near the same level of performance. I would say the next high value option up from at least what I've seen is the Archon optics. They're 4-16 and their higher magnification line as well, for about $400 to $500. Again, very, very good scopes for that price range, but that's about double what this guy is at. So for the money of $200, $250, if you just need a budget, high magnification scope, good reticle, first focal plane, quarter MOA turrets, very, very good glass. Again, for the money, it's on par with basically any other Chinese manufactured scope. Very, very high quality, more than durable enough to survive the drop test, survive the 300 Win Mag, survived, a 308 short barrel, the suppressed, and a bunch of other fun stuff. It held up very, very well, much more than I would ever really need it to, or you would ever really need it to, even if you were out hunting with it and it took a really nasty spill, or you took a really nasty spill. The zero might be off slightly, but I don't think you're going to damage the optic. Now, again, as I mentioned, it is a very, very heavy scope. It takes a fairly lightweight gun like my 12.5-inch 308, which is like 8 pounds with a scope, and takes it up into the 10-pound range, which is very heavy for a short-barreled AR, even an AR-10. But again, short-barreled, palm and lower, it's a fairly lightweight gun. But very big, very heavy, lots of features, not that much money. That is the way that I would summarize this review. But again, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think about this optic, or if there's any other budget high magnification scopes I should test out. Again, for me, it's a little hard to do a lot of high magnification scopes just because I don't have the room all of the time to really stretch them out and see how they perform at longer ranges. As I mentioned, the turrets did track really well for me for zeroing purposes, but because I really wasn't using them for dialing at longer ranges, it's hard to make sure that they track consistently over time, not shooting at a lot of different extended ranges. So keep that in mind for this review. And definitely try and find a couple other channels. I think Gavin Tube, Ultimate Reloader, that guy, he's done some videos on this optic as well, and we both pretty much come to the same conclusion. You can't get more for less money. I think this is pretty much the peak of value in terms of budget, high magnification scopes. Again, first focal plane, good turrets, good illumination, surprisingly, good glass, good durability, all that sort of other fun stuff. So once again, that's about it for the video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think of this down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.